All right, welcome back, everybody. You know why you're here. So much to talk about, and let's get right to it. This is a continuation of the discussion where we just sort of left off the last time, and some big
To be
news
continued.
to be continued. So let's dive into another big topic that's affecting everyone in the industry, and that is the recent announcement, not so recent announcement, but it's kind of hard to not sort of keep thinking about it and talking about it, and that is the changes that are coming to Chrome and supporting third-party cookies. So let's start there.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, this is something that is at least top of mind to me because I feel like this is something that we all read probably 6 months ago, but it started to trickle up to C-suite and trickle to salespeople. Like, I think I'm all of a sudden, at least for me personally, I'm now getting incoming asking for what is our POV on getting
Mhm.
rid, on Google dropping cookies. And this feels like an insane moment because it's like, I don't know. Google said it's not for 2 years. In like ad tech time, that's like, we age in dog years. That's like two
Yeah.
lifetimes from now. Uh,
Hmm.
so it feels like impossible to have a POV. I don't know about you, but this feels so similar to me to when we all learned that like Google was going to change from second price auctions to first price auctions, and everyone was asking, so what does that mean?
Hmm.
And the smartest minds that I knew were all like, I don't know, we're gonna find out. And that kind
Yeah.
of feels like what this is. Like, I don't know, there's no one has an answer as far as I know of. Everyone who has an answer, when you actually like dig into their tech,
Yeah.
is still using cookies. So
Yeah.
like,
Absolutely.
I don't
I mean,
know.
there's literally some companies that just like that's all they do, right? Right? So it's interesting to sort of think about, um, this. I don't. I can't even say pivot. This is a big change. So,
It
but I
is
will say
foundational to
that.
how programmatic is purchased right now. It is foundational to
Yep.
how everything from as basic as frequency caps to like really intense demographic targeting. It's all
I,
based on this.
I will say it is good though to see like a lot of discussion around it. So there's some great threads that are out there. I think there's a lot of speculation, which is obviously really important. So we're trying to figure out what's going on. But then there's a lot of sort of areas where folks are pointing out what it will mean, for some businesses, and and obviously that's a lot of change. But let me ask you your opinion on this because this is fairly recent news, just a couple of months old. But don't you feel like we could have, now that we know this is happening, like almost take a giant step back 2 years ago and almost take a look at, what happened with ITP and start to think about,
Oh, they're
what
like
happened, there.
Apple tried to do this. This is exactly what they were going for, and this is what they're like slowly leading Yeller behind the barn to let us know what was going to happen. Like this, we shouldn't be surprised by it. But if there's anything I know about ad tech, it's that we're surprised by everything and we don't do anything about something till the last possible moment. Look at
Mhm.
GDPR, look at CCPA. I don't know about most of you, but I know for us, we didn't get legal CCPA information, which we got ours the exact same time as every large publisher, more than 96 hours before jump. Like it feels like this is probably too important to do in that level.
Mhm.
Like there's probably going to have to be something, but I
Yeah.
know, like all I know is at the stage in all of this we are is hucksters are talking about their non-cookie things, uh, but everyone is still using cookies. So it's, yeah, should we have known about this beforehand? Absolutely. Is it pretty on brand for ad tech to have not done anything about it and to be freaking out? Yeah. Also, yes.
So here's some good news for some other shows coming up. We're gonna have some great guests to actually talk about it.
Yes.
We're gonna have some great guests from the publisher side. We're
To
gonna have
make
some great
smarter people
guests
answer this
from
question.
yeah. We'll have some folks from the buy side, and we'll have some folks from the tech side to sort of unpack it all. So I think that that'll be really exciting for everybody watching and listening to understand that's coming up too. So, but yeah, no, it's kind of interesting to sort of think also about there's so much we don't know, right? So it's
What do you
hard to
think?
form
Where do you
perspective,
think we're
right,
gonna
with
go?
what we don't know.
Where do you think we're gonna go?
Um,
Sorry to interrupt you, but like,
yeah, no,
I think the easy answer is contextual targeting. I gave the
yeah,
easy answer a while back. There, what's his name that did? Is it YieldBot? That was all contextual
yeah.
targeting. Is
So
probably feeling pretty smart right now. But like, do buyers actually want contextual? Because like, sure, they kind of want contextual, but then they want to make sure they're hitting a household income of 100,000 plus and financial assets above 5 million and yada yada yada. And not unless you are like but three sites, you don't have a contextual targeting segment that fits that.
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that I feel like most of what we see is going to be compiling 3 or 4 sort of solutions all at one time, you know? And so part of it's contextual, right? Part of it is building your own ID if you don't have that, right? Part of that is enabling more of what you already have if you've got something that's sexy in the form of data, right? Building segments. I mean, so it's going to be a combination of things, and I think I think that's really hard to orchestrate all those things at one time. Quite
Do
honestly,
you
because
do you
some of those things people have been trying to do for some time and never really gained traction. You know,
do you think any of the identity solutions out there are the answer?
I think it'll become more real, and folks who didn't get along and or not get along but didn't come together more will have to. They will absolutely have to, because I think that's the challenge, right? Any of the identity solutions, and let's break it down first. Let's talk about maybe some of the consortium attempts, by some of the larger partners where it makes sense for that to happen. Up to this point, the reality is kind of like they're all independent businesses, right? So it's sort of hard to come together and really say, "Hey, yeah, we're going to come together," you know.
And
But I think that
I'm
will have to
still
happen.
I must be like I'm particularly dense around this. I don't know that much around identity, so that's why I can't wait to like really make a smart person explain it to me. Not that you're not. Uh, but
That's why we have guests. Yeah,
but I still don't understand how a consortium, how that doesn't like how is that not a third party cookie in the
yeah,
end? Like if data that is acquired on some other publishers that's a part of the consortium site
yeah.
and that I then get to use, how is that not third party data? I
I
don't
mean,
know
I
how
think
that.
that's the problem as it is right now, right? Like literally what they were saying they would do is kind of give you another version of that third party cookie,
Well,
basically,
and yeah,
is
they
what was
all say they
happening.
use like
So
local storage, but then ITP, like then that's just one more ITP feature away from going away. Also, they use
yeah,
like local storage plus a cookie still to set like none of
yeah,
that makes like again. There's always a cookie.
yeah,
So then follow up question like, is there a world where you need DMPs?
yeah. Look at
And
that.
like, does it cut out one leg of what CDP's growth, forecasted growth is expected to be? Because they're all expecting to just eat up the DMP pool plus all of
Yeah,
this other
right.
stuff. But
Yeah.
like, can they do that? Can they eat the
It's
DMP
interesting
pool?
because man, the DMPs were sort of just like on life support. And
Yeah,
then the CDPs were
yeah.
like,
Well,
ah
that's
ha ha, here we go, right? And the next
yeah.
thing you
Well,
know,
CDPs
you
were like
know,
going to eat their lunch, and then then permutive came out of nowhere, and then Loki
right,
got all
right.
in its his about permutive because they were lying or maybe not lying. I don't know. Again, I'm not smart enough in this whole space to figure out who's lying or who's telling the truth. But it's I don't know. This whole space
Yeah,
it feels crazy that this underpins everything in that you and I've been doing for 10, 15 years each,
yeah.
and that between the two of us, we probably can't scrape together a coherent answer.
And I think that's a lot of people, right? What's interesting though is I think a lot of the companies that we have worked with for so long and been helpful are actually going to probably be part of the solution set again, just in a different way. And
You
so
being positive.
yeah, well, it's weird. It's like we have to have somebody sort of help us do it, right? And so, like, actually, I just wrote about that recently. I think that we're gonna find that we're gonna be having to have to sort of rely on some of those partners again, because the reality is like not a lot of publishers, and we speak a lot mainly from the supply side and from the
Yeah.
publisher side, that we're not really tech companies, and so, and that's where, the tech companies can step up and really be helpful. But
Somewhere
a lot
Jared
of
Dicker is like getting he's shaking right now in anger.
but but the same is true of like our sort of like buy side partners, right? They're not really tech companies. Some of the buying platforms are, right, but like in terms of the brands and the advertisers, whether you're doing it in house or whether you're an agency or anything like that, like you're not a tech company either, right? So it's just fascinating to see how this is going to have 18 months to play out, right? I mean, we see 24, but really things start happening sooner.
18
Here we
months,
are.
but it might be, who knows?
Yeah.
Google's going to delay it as long as it takes for Google to have an answer to it, but they already have an answer to it because they have your Gmail login. So as long as you're Google sign in to do Google search,
we're just caught in the middle.
Oh, we're just, I think we've just always been the emperor's new clothes. We just like are now really starting to realize it, or at least that maybe they're rubbing our noses in it. I don't know. Okay, so
Well,
let's go.
I was gonna say, I have a feeling, the thing is like you got to try to have some sort of a plan, right? And
Yeah, but like,
I think the
where do
plan
you
is
go?
4 or
Where do you
5.
set?
Yeah,
Yeah, where do you
I
set
think
your chips?
yeah, I think the plan is you got to do a little bit of everything that makes sense, right? And then from there, it sort of the plan thins out and starts to become better. But it's really hard to try to have all the answers. You just know that there's at least 4 or 5 paths you have to go down and start making moves down those paths, because there's a
Well,
lot of folks out there who are just going to be frozen in fear and have no plan, and that's a bad thing.
it feels like at most right now you can put plans in light pencil, because like right now you still are answering the quarterly RFP cycle. I mean, God willing, considering the situation, but
Hmm.
and that is still coming from brands that have some of, I must say, the either saddest or funniest audience segment requests I've ever read in my life. Um, None of which are possible without third party. Like
Yeah.
even someone with a very rich first party can't hit
So
some of these things without an enrichment of third party,
yeah.
of which I have not seen a compelling case to be made that most third party isn't total garbage. But it's possible that it's not.
Yeah.
It's
Well, so it's interesting, right? So like, with what you're talking about is like, I mean, there's some aspects where, you know, maybe so much of the business being powered by a third party cookie is actually not all bad, because if we start thinking about, sort of some of the changes that are going to happen, it's going to force advertising to kind of get real dumb in some areas too. It's going to,
this is my
you
concern.
know,
My concern is actually that, because someone tried to make the case that this was good for publishers, but like I don't believe that, because like this is the same reason that I've concerned about publishers saying that we need an identity solution
mm.
to match
Talk about that for a second.
one of Facebook, uh, because like sure it would be nice, but like no, we're never gonna we can't. That is, we are waging a war on Facebook's strategic advantage, and it feels like you're just waging one to lose.
Mhm.
Um, the war I want to wage with Facebook is whether they are properly valuing my content,
Gotcha.
whether my
Yeah.
content is what's making their lifeblood. Like that's a
Mhm.
war that I think we as publishers can win, on whether our audience, like we can come up with a technical solution to match theirs for audience targeting. There's no chance. Like it's laughable. And so this notion that like we're going to come up with some solution that works on the top 1,000 websites, like, or that like no, and also if this were to all go away today, buyers would spend the exact same amount of money. They would just shift even more to walled gardens, who can still very easily take your vat of CRM data, match it against their whatever they have, and boom, you can still get a targeting. Like you can still get all the first party targeting, or rich targeting that you want from Amazon, Google, and Facebook, period. Like depending on who you are as an advertiser, between those three companies, you can do everything you want. and not like if the cookie died, it wouldn't affect you one bit. It wouldn't affect those companies one bit. They would just increase share a little bit more. And that's kind of my concern here, is that like,
Yeah.
that's all this does. And that's kind of exactly what Google was trying to do. It's not what Apple was trying to do. I think Apple thought they were going to, like stick one to Google, but more regulation only helps the people with the resources to fight
Still
or
working
work
on it.
around
Still working on it.
like let's again, I think the battle for us to wage against two of those at the very least is that our content is what makes the reason that your company is valued at what it is and makes the revenue it does is because of us. Without us, you have a lesser product. So I think we have a leg to stand on there. I don't think we want to battle over who has better audience or who has better tech. Like that's not our thing.
Right, you don't have more engineers? You can't.
Like more engineers, more resources. They have more. Like they've spent their entire lives are based on this. Google and Facebook both make it more than 90% of their revenue from advertising. Like this is
so what's interesting is we're talking about, that is like, you hear a lot of discussion around the value of probabilistic, data versus deterministic data, and probabilistic's bad. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think we're rearranging chairs in the Titanic, but wow, that was easy for me to say. I think we're rearranging chairs in the Titanic, but I think there are such few people that have deterministic data that like the people that are touting deterministic data aren't talking about their lookalike segments. And the people that are, honestly, the people that are trying to sell probabilistic data are just the rest of the world. I think the majority of what anyone buys when they buy an audience segment is probabilistic data, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you like know the truth of it or not. It's that. So if there is any value in it, yeah, I don't know. This is where your optimism and my cynicism polarize in a very extreme way. I am so cynical about audience data because every time I've had a peek behind the curtain, it has felt like I have seen like chaos. It's never been something that has instilled confidence in me, in which someone's like, no, here, let me show you all of these case studies of firm scientific rigor that we have done that shows an uplift of X, Y, or Z. It's like, oh, no, we have a gap in measurement over here because we can't see like YouTube people. And then we have gaps over here because like we didn't really get a true control. So like we think we did this, because attribution is a mess on top of targeting, on top of everything else. It just feels like, it feels like everyone that sells audience data is selling hopes and dreams. I mean, I know there are people. I can't wait to get like Jana on here because she very much disagrees with me and has told me many times to my face I am wrong. But
she's coming.
Yeah, but no, that's kind of my stance. How about yours?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a balance between sort of both, right? So I think there's a lot of talk about some of that changing, but I'm thinking that a lot won't change. It's just what's going to happen. So
yeah, instead of using one technology, we'll use a slightly different one, but the promises will be the same.
Just pretty much. So, but we'll see. TBD. So much to cover. What else we got?
That's a cynical optimism right there. The next is one that I'm super interested in talking to some of the people around it, but it's been hot, like top of my mind for probably the last 12 months. It is this notion of buyers finally waking up to SPO. Because SPO originally started as actually sort of a ad tech thing. I'm pretty sure AppNexus did it. Brian O'Kelly finally like gave it a name, I want to say in like 2017, but it was originally just like how they identified exchanges So how their DSP identified exchanges that claimed to be selling in second party, but actually were messing with the auction and selling in first party. It was their way of finding very inefficient buying paths based on comparing it to everything else. Since then, it is still that same premise, which is to winnow away inefficient buying paths. But it feels like something that buyers have not woken up to. I was in at a publisher and buy side event last year around this time, in which the majority, it was being presented as a newfound thing to buyers to not select all exchanges when coming up with their tactics. And I remember myself and all of the publishers in the room were aghast, appalled, because we've been thinking about this for a very long time. The difference between a tier one, like there was a Reddit, and there probably is Google Doc going around a while back, in which exchanges were rated from like tier 1 to tier 6. So we've had this knowledge of the difference between like really good supply versus kind of okay versus, but it feels like buyers are just waking up to this. And when I say, like, the buyers in the room spent billions of dollars a year. So I know you have a little more information about this, but Jounce and someone else recently put out something around resellers and SPO. Walk me through that a bit.
Some great research put out by some great companies that really were examining, all the different paths to supply and trying to explain that basically, there's still a whole lot of paths to supply, and so I think on average it was about 20 different supply paths, was the average
for anyone's site
to a site. So, with that being said, it's interesting because I think, buyers are still continuing to use these multiple paths. So it looks like there's more to come there, but just the research I think is really helpful, being able to sort of compile it, distill it, and then sort of examine it. Because like, as you were saying, I mean, there's like 80 plus exchanges, that are out there, right? So you have to sort of think about like who you're working with, why, but then also,
and when talking about paths, there's like even we're a very legitimate operation. We do not allow our only resellers are literally a rep firm that handles a certain geography. So like a true understanding of a reseller versus something else. So all of our other paths are direct. And yet still, if you were to, there are certain exchanges that there are 3 paths to them on our site. So it's not like, it's super interesting to me that there's a technological, like if you're using EBDA or open bidding, whatever Google's calling now, if you're using Amazon's TAM or UAM, and if you're using Prebid or Index or any of the other wrappers, that's 3 paths where you can have, like, these can all be very legitimate, but also they are very different. The Google open bidding has its own thing with like speed requirements, and they seem to be very, very good on AMP pages, but that's primarily what you're buying with that, is you're buying AMP traffic but I guess now with the recent changes, you're kind of getting extra signals with the minimum bid to win and all of that. So maybe it's going to get better. Who knows? Amazon is server to server, so you're going to, in the same way as open bidding, you kind of lose a bit of the match rate there. And then there's Prebid, which in theory should be the best because it's on the page, all of these other things. But this, I mean, I look forward to having a conversation with someone about this, but to me, this is my biggest existential crisis for publishers, is if the buy side ever figures out concurrency, ever can like dedupe requests and realize that like the 14 or so, or the 21 in the case of the research you showed, requests are actually 4. Like what happens to publishers? What happens to my bid density? Because like it feels like a lot of that is artificial and inflated, but I don't know of a better way to do it. Like I genuinely don't. Like it feels like we're gonna start running into weird things there when we start playing with that. Also, SPO is starting to get new because there's this like new thing that exchanges are doing. I still don't understand it. Exchanges are signing SPO agreements with DSPs. What does that mean? How do you preordain an SPO? The whole point of SPO is that it's supposed to like be different for every campaign and every buyer and yada yada yada, and just be like based on, you know, all statistical rigor. But you're just going to agree with
Well,
an
I think
exchange.
Well, I think also we forget with all the different layers of complexity, right? The reality is that people want to keep it easy and simple,
Yeah,
right?
well,
So
I
it's
mean,
like,
it goes back to the old system. I'm not saying this is occurring, but there was a very old system of kickbacks and refunds going to
yeah,
agencies. So agencies could show clients that they were only charging X, but actually still make margin on it, especially every time they went in review and they compressed their margin from 15% to 12.5%. So then agency who still needed that 15% would turn around and figure out a way to get 2 or 3% kickback elsewhere. It feels like there, if that's not occurring, there's definitely an opportunity for that to occur here.
it keeps it easy, keeps it
Yeah,
simple.
it makes it real. Like, you know, that's someone, you know, accidentally leaves a briefcase somewhere full of money. Like, or I don't know, if you're high enough up at an agency, you get invited to some canned stuff, some, you know, some real nice places, and you might pick that one over the other one. Again, not saying this happens, it just feels like it's ripe for that to occur.
Makes
Um,
sense. Makes sense. Well, what else do we have to cover?
uh, Honestly, that's all I have for now. I could really like any one of these I would love to dig into, and I'm looking very forward to Eric. If you don't know this, for all that I am or have done, I know very few people in this industry. I feel like I know, at best, I know like a dozen, maybe 2 dozen. Eric, on the other hand, can give you the lineage of any of hundreds of people in this industry and knows where they were beforehand. They're all big hitters to him. If you ever talk to Eric,
It's
oh yeah, they were
it's
big
his way
hitters.
of it's his nice way of saying I'm old.
I don't think you're
No,
much
no,
older
no,
than me.
no. I'm just kidding.
You're
No, no.
sales, I'm
Nah,
operations.
he's saying I talk to a lot of people. No,
You talk a
but
lot. That's what I'm
no,
saying.
we're that's true. That's true. So we'll be able to touch on some more of those subjects a little bit later. So thanks for joining us, and we'll keep the conversation going.
See, enjoyed your extra special first episode. So got that going for you. All right.
See you
Thank you,
guys
everyone.
soon. But I was just saying that, like, it could be really scary sounding out there for publishers if you don't have a bunch of first party data. And my point is,
Yeah.
don't worry. Like, there's going to be partnerships that we can strike. There's going to be tech that we can rent. We'll be able to build our own stuff. There's going to be some
Well,
rough patches. You know what I mean? But
the
there's other
the
stuff
wild
out
part
there
to
that,
me is like, even so, and maybe this was a misconception in my head, but I always believed if you had a paywall, you had good first party data, because now you finally had email, you had
yeah.
you had registration data. Like, that doesn't tell you anything. Like, even like Wall Street Journal, who's like asking how much money you make and like all of this on their
Yeah.
onboarding, like, all my data is wrong. I'm sorry, Steph, but like all of my data is wrong. So
How
you
clean
can't.
is it? How truthful is it? Right?
It's, you don't have any like, if you are a non-topical publisher, you don't have any good or deep data about anyone, especially especially a news publisher, because if a user comes in from Facebook, they come in from AMP,
Mm-hmm.
they come in from all different sources, which, as far as their cookie pool is concerned, they're a net new person.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's a
So is it kind of interesting to sort of think about, like, how then this discussion around deterministic versus probabilistic data, there's always going to be a giant need for probabilistic approaches, or just better probabilistic data, right?
so
Over this, like,
this
sort
is,
of
it's something I harped
deterministic.
on in one of my newsletters. This notion that we know what we're looking for is asinine. It's insane. We don't know what we're looking for. The methodology is when you actually start talking to like some like the people that are in charge of this,
Hmm.
it's loose at best. No one other than Google or Facebook have a large enough pool to actually start getting accurate and start getting like having good statistical rigor behind the choices that they make when it comes to picking an audience pool. Because the rest of us have a trade-off to make, which is scale.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah. Yep.
it's I just realized
Absolutely.
we should definitely be recording. I'm recording actually,
Well,
and so
good.
maybe I'll figure
So
out a way to splice this into
absolutely.